Good afternoon. It's great to have you here for the seventh in our series, Leadership Lessons in Troubled Times. My name is Robert Lin, and I'm Associate Director at the Schulich Executive Education Centre. We are delighted to have as our speaker this morning, John Bayliss, Walmart's Senior Vice President of Logistics and Supply Chain. John leads Walmart Canada's supply chain, logistics, corporate strategy, and development. He will be interviewed by my colleague, Alan Middleton, SEEK's Executive Director. To ask questions during the session, please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Like previous sessions, we will be recording this session for our video library. Now, I would like to hand over to Alan Middleton, SEEK's Executive Director. Alan?
Thank you very much, Robert, and welcome, John. We're delighted to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, John, we'll start in with how are you seeing things in terms of consumer behavior? Any return that we're seeing in shopping behaviors as we think across the country? How are things going?
Yeah, I have to tell you, the last 100 days has been pretty extraordinary, I think, for everyone. And while I think it's great to see the sun shining, the summer arriving, some elements of normalcy returning. I think there continues to be some changes that I think are going to be here to stay for a while. When you look at customer behavior, we're seeing still very large baskets and fewer trips, as I think people are as they leave their home, they want to make sure that they're practicing social distancing, still only going on trips that they need to go on. And so, that's the beginning of a trend. We think that's going to be here for a little while, as well as, some categories like food and sort of the weekly shop, the grocery basket. I think with the shift away from, restaurants and to more prepare and eat at home, you've seen those parts of our business continue to see really, really strong sales, I think, similar to our competitors, as people are spending a lot more time at home.
Absolutely. Thinking about your supply chain role, it must have been chaotic back in March, and as you've come through the little while. Take us a bit through that time period, though I'm sure you don't want to relive it, but what kind of...
Well, I was going to say, I think I had hair back in February. But if I reflect on the journey, I think it was truly extraordinary. First off, what happened in March with the surge in buying to really prep for lockdown, and sort of the demand, I think, on retail in Canada, was truly unprecedented. And I think the photos you've seen were things you'd see, I think, in other parts of the world, but I don't think anyone in Canada had experienced before. So, from a supply chain standpoint, it's not every day. We have safety stock settings throughout our chain to make sure, we're prepared to serve our customers. And in that instance, you almost had the entire safety stock in the Canadian supply chain pulled through in a matter of days.
Wow.
So obviously facing into that volume, I mean, we saw absolutely record volumes in March. It was 20% bigger than our biggest period going into Christmas. And almost 2x what we had planned into only 30 days before. So it was truly extraordinary.
How did you handle it? How did you go about thinking about that? All hands to the pump, but how long can that continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we got through it, really, we focused on two horizons of effort. The first one was today for tomorrow. So, how am I going to get this product through? How am I going to deal with volume coming in the door that's twice my capacity? What can we do to tactically to survive the next 48 hours and get our customers what they need? But I think the second horizon was the more important one, which was more longer term. What can we do to make this more sustainable? So, I reflect on it was the first weekend of the crisis. I was actually over in the UK myself visiting Asda, one of our sister businesses. And a member of my team called me and said, we see the volumes coming through. we're going to have a major problem this weekend. We're not sure how we're going to face into it. And so we talked about making some moves that could address those issues, but it would take 7 to 10 days to address. And so the immediate reaction was, well, that's not going to help us tomorrow, which was true. But what got us through the crisis was we were doing what we could to survive today for tomorrow, but also taking action today that would help us in 2 weeks. So that as we went through the crisis, things started to stabilize. And, I think I really applaud our leaders across the business for facing into that weekend, which, it was almost an unwinnable fight for many. But it was important that we took the actions that would not only get through the weekend best we could, but act today in ways that would help us in 2 weeks' time. So that was kind of always our discussion on what can I do for tomorrow and what could I do today that can help us make this more sustainable within the next 2 weeks.
There's a real management lesson in there, isn't there? Which is, focus on your crisis, but always try to be thinking through what the next step will be to try to get ahead of it. How did your people?
Absolutely.
How did you get your people to respond in that way?
Well, I think first off, we have phenomenal associates, and I think being in our sites and talking to our drivers in the early days of the crisis, and I think many of you who would have gone out shopping for that run, there was a certain anxiety, of leaving our house. I applaud the courage and the passion of our leaders that went into the sites every day. I think it was that we are a purpose, mission-driven company. It's emblazoned on everything. You see it on our trucks. You see it in our buildings. We save money so people can live better. And I think that was a real rallying cry for our people. And so, that was really the motivation, where there was a real sense of purpose. People were nervous to come to work, but I think reminding everyone of the impact we were having in supporting Canadians, and making also sure that those associates are safe when they come to work through quickly putting in some measures, I think really helped get that spirit going, so that they could face into some of the real challenges. Now, the second part I talked about on getting ready for how do we sustain it was really important, because that positive energy and motivation, can help you through a couple of weeks. But I think we very quickly realized we're in for a marathon here. And so that's where, more of the long range planning has to kick in to make sure that we get people to rest, relief, and also make some things more sustainable for people.
Over that time, did you continue to basically use the same suppliers? Because there was a lot of discussion going on about if the consumer couldn't find what they regularly use, they were open because of supply needs to move on to somebody new. So this a period where you were also coping with bringing in new supply sources?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. 2 things. One, we've got a great group of suppliers who, from a supply chain Canadian family perspective, they were facing the same issues we were, demand and actually getting product through producing it. So, with our core suppliers, very early in the crisis, there was a focus in on the key items that they could produce as efficiently as possible to get through to Canadians. So, instead of selling and trying to replenish 25 different types of toilet tissue, we were going to focus on the 5 to make sure we got that supply through. So I think that was working with our current suppliers. There was a second group where, I think of meat, some of the food categories where, there's been some challenges, I think, throughout the supply chain. Our merchants have done a phenomenal job in working with partners like in food service and other places to get supply and even merchandise in a different way. I mean, it's not often you go see a food service box of hamburgers in our stores, but our merchants have found creative ways to get supply, to get that to Canadians. And then the third one is new suppliers. I think there's some categories and areas. I think of personal health and safety, masks, categories that actually didn't really exist in a big way 100 days ago, where we've got a great team of merchants that are out looking for those new suppliers to make sure we can get what Canadians need into our stores. So it's been a bit of both. It's been rethinking how we buy and flow product with our core suppliers. Employing some tactics to try and get different types of SKUs or sizes on product that we were having a tough time getting through conventional channels, and then also looking at sort of new categories or areas that are coming to the fore now that we needed to build. And all three of those have been going on in the last 100 days.
You've been a busy man, you and your team. It's a question, one of the long-term trends in supply chain was just in time. Then following a previous crisis, there was a little bit of just in case where you stocked up. Have you stored more products in order to be able to meet with some agility different demands, or has it, the base process pretty well stayed the same?
Yeah, I think it's always a balancing act when you go through your stock settings, stock levels, just in time versus carrying buffer. And I think all the Canadian supply chain, it's a very efficiently run chain in Canada. We have some very, very, very strong supply chains. But it's been run very much for efficiency, to your point. So I think one of the things the crisis has shown us is putting in resiliency and some of the value of buffer in the right areas that allows us to respond to some of these shocks. So, I think when we look forward, at least over the next 12 to 18 months, there's not going to be wholesale shifts, but you think of things like if you're sourcing remotely overseas and bringing that in, very, very long lead times, great cost. How do I trade that off against higher cost, but closer to demand? And there is a trade-off there, and our merchants and replenishment team does a phenomenal job of trying to get that balancing act. But I think that crisis has, had us revisit some of that, and also revisit as we go into key seasons. How do we think about the safety stocks we cover? To your point, because we want to make sure we always stand tall on some key items for our customer.
You've touched on something where there's a lot of discussion in the industry, which is local sourcing versus global sourcing. A lot of politics on things like masks. Why did we have to bring in everything from China? Didn't we have any local suppliers? How do you see that affecting the future? Will there be a move to more localization number of areas, do you think, or will the globalization, return in that sense?
Yeah, I think it's if I had a crystal ball, I would. Exactly. I think if anything, the crisis has just had us go back and question and actually factor in resiliency into really our cost thinking as we think about where we're sourcing, how we're sourcing, and again, that balance between great cost, longer lead time, and maybe a little bit more on the first cost, but shorter responses. And there's kind of a time and place for both. And so I think as a organization, kind of relooking at that, like we always do, I think is this crisis has brought some of that work into tighter focus.
Yeah. We'll go to questions when they come in. So I welcome them in 3 or 4 minutes. As you think about what you've been through and you think about the future, what kind of lessons come up? And I'm thinking about things, working with your suppliers, have relationships there changed? Working with your people, who you've called out how brilliant your team has been. And I wonder if there are changes there. In many ways, retail front lines, they may not be quite as much at risk as healthcare front lines, but they are the front lines. So how are relationships there been developing?
Yeah, I think if anything, this crisis really reinforced the power of kind of the grassroots frontline culture, certainly that Walmart has, where despite what gets you through these large peaks and these large crises and allows us to move at pace is really the people. There's a lot of investment we're making, that the industry is making in technology and systems, which is really enhancing the day-to-day quality decision making for our leaders and our people. But if I think through, you know, in the period of 30 days, we were able to scale and bring forward the expanded online grocery capacity for our full year plan in 1 month. So we did 12 months of work in 1 month to really ratchet up and respond to the needs of Canadians. And that was not done by, yes, there's investments and there's great systems that enable that, but that's driven by people. And that's driven by sort of the ingenuity and really grassroots efforts of people coast to coast. So I think this effort has underscored the importance of that. But I think the biggest change that we're looking at is really the ways of working and how we talk to each other, how we use things like Zoom, how we can get out into our sites and facilities. You know, this morning I was on a virtual tour walk with our executives for a store in Quebec, getting out and as a leadership team using Zoom to go through and do a virtual walk of that store to help support that store manager. So the crisis has had us rethink how we're using technology in different ways to better support our people and our customer.
Mm-hmm. One of the things previous speakers have talked about is how much this crisis and the follow-up to it has begun to break down some of the silo thinking, both within organizations and inside and outside organizations. Is that something you've observed? It sounds like you've got a fairly coherent management team anyway, but are you seeing problem-solving break down some of the more silo mentalities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like any large organization, you know, and we are a very large one and globally, but in Canada as well. You know, it's natural. You're going to have silos. You're going to have different views. But you know, when you think of the crisis, every day, at least for the first month, there was a 30-minute call with sort of the top leaders of the business across all the functions, and to reflect on the speed of decision making around decision around how to support the store, decision around how to roll out a new approach, decision around how to cut over on supply. Decision, I mean, we popped up with some food service partners, parallel network to our perishable network within really 10 days to help support the demand. All of those things, if I reflect on the pre-COVID world, the challenges, the analysis, the questions to make sure it was the right decision, you know, probably would have taken 10 months, not 10 weeks. And I think the courage to try things new to get us through the crisis, and also our ability to unwind things quickly when it didn't work, I think is real proof that, you know, even, I think Lou Gershner used to say, even an elephant can dance when he was turning around IBM. I sort of felt that way at moments with Walmart, where you know, we're the elephant at times in retail, but it's amazing how quickly we moved.
It's interesting. We're hearing that from some of our healthcare leaders as well, saying that in drug development and in some of the cooperation in healthcare, part of what's happening is they're cutting the red tape. So it's not that, you know, people are getting less focused on rigorous follow-up with the science, but some of the unnecessary red tape has been cut, and you're reflecting that. I'm going to go to a couple of questions here. So I've got one from Didra Sudaman. With new suppliers and demand, how has that grown your business? And will you permanently add to the supply chain when there's a kind of return to, I hate the phrase, but the new normal?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think the way we have seen that demand grow, and we've had to flex out our supply chain, and I think that's been, you know, within the current constraints, what can we do? So we've rethought, how do we organize our ships? How do we flow between our facilities? You know, we've got a great team of industrial engineers that have kind of thought in new and creative ways of how to get more through the existing. So I think that will always be there, because we realize now, I mean, we had some facilities that were doing 10 to 15% above what the engineers, when they designed them, said was ever possible. So I think that's capacity that we can find that will allow us to address the demand if it's at a sustained level. But the other thing we've done is, it's working with partners, third parties and others to build up sort of parallel networks. I mentioned the food service one. That's we're thinking of it in sort of, again, the two horizons. One is here's what we put to get through the here and now, while we assess what we think the traffic and the pattern is going to be, because there will be a return to, I'll take online grocery. The demand was immense. More Canadians tried online grocery than ever, and I think it overwhelmed a lot of us in Canada. I think we've found our feet now as we've added capacity. There will be a comeback a little bit, but no one's disputing that this has brought forward online adoption in Canada probably by years. So for us, the test is figuring out, of the incremental capacity, how much do we need to actually go and then expand and physically build out our facilities to help accommodate the new normal, whatever that is when we get there.
Absolutely. Actually, just to follow up on that, this is from Craig Nagel. Will you discuss alternative shopping arrangement impacts, which are partly done, but he gives some examples, like curbside pickup and delivery services. You had this infrastructure in place. How do you see that going forward?
Yeah, I think our strategy is really to try and use the stores as our certainly for online as our point of differentiation. We have over 400, if you think of it, super centers, large mini warehouses from coast to coast, and so it's we had been on a journey with a great new leader in e-commerce who joined us last year of trying to use more of a pick from store pickup model in Canada as a way to really differentiate ourselves. I think the fact that we did that, again, it expanding that capacity and expanding that capability, it comes down to people. So making sure we got associates in the stores that can pick and process, and a little bit of systems rollout. So I think what allowed us to accelerate the capacity where, during the height of the crisis, challenges on slots, challenges on getting that capacity, we're able to hire in, we're able to drop in these systems into new stores to create new nodes and open up that capacity very quickly. Because, the online shopping, the pickup, especially on grocery, I think those are trends that had been there before. Yeah. And this crisis has only accelerated that, over the last few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question here, actually, from one of our team, one of our supply chain team. What was the most daunting challenge and the greatest achievement as you've gone through this? You've talked a little about the challenge, that adaptability, and I wonder if there are others. But, what would you say is ongoing your biggest challenge?
Yeah, one I haven't touched on, and the biggest challenge is just making sure that our teams are safe, and whether that's in the stores or facilities or our fleet. And I think in the early days of the crisis, the challenge was, you would get conflicting reports on what was required, what wasn't. It was hard to get a gauge on what would really make a difference. And we were fortunate early days to have some medical advisors helping us, also talking a lot to our associates, and then get really taking action early. Because I'll use an example of, we made the decision to roll out masks, do temperature screening, roll out gloves, make that available to all of our associates. And although the announcement was a few early April, that decision had to be made 4 weeks prior. And so, the biggest challenge was, what do we need to do now to keep people safe? And the challenge now is continue to remain vigilant on some of those protocols, because there still is a virus out there, and making sure that we keep our people focused on some of those disciplines we've put in is important to keep our customers safe. Yeah. I think the greatest achievement is again, with what our associates have driven. We were able to bounce back after that phenomenal surge. Within the matter of a couple of weeks, we were back, with in-stock levels that we're not that far off where we've seen them during normal trading. So I think that's, to stand tall in that surge and to be able to respond, I think is something we're all very, very proud of and continue to be proud
Excellent. Another question, and I won't read the full question, but it's a question about customer service at this time. Because customers expect a certain sort of delivery from Walmart when you order stuff online, and sometimes some of the stuff is slower than others and some are faster.
Absolutely.
How have you managed, or how has the organization managed its customer service response over this time?
Yeah, we've had our challenges. I think and again, we are primary focus is our customer. It goes back to Sam Walton. The customer is the boss, and we only have one boss. That's a customer. And so, I think if I look at e-com, for example, I think call center capacities, service capacities. Also some of the technical systems and actually track and trace, working with some of our carrier partners. And even I know inside our core supply chain, actually keeping tabs on where POs are, where the volumes are. When you're dealing with, that surge in volume, you have to run really hard. And we weren't able to run fast enough in some cases, but the investments, again, it's in the spirit of the 2 tracks, a management lesson. There's some things in the here and now where you have to fight every day to be as good as you can, knowing you can't get to 100%. But what we're committed to as a business is making those investments now that we know will help get us to 100% of that expectation in the coming weeks and months. And so, whether that's expanding our call center capacity, expanding our OG pickup capacity, expanding our supply chain throughput capacity, driver capacity, those are all things that we're pushing on. But certainly customer service, I know I've personally received, a lot of notes. It's one, as any Walmart leader, it pains you because, again, that is your boss talking to you and it tells you we need to do better and run faster to meet the needs of Canadians in this time.
Yeah. Just a little note in there. Obviously, your IT department's been busy in this process. I mean, one of the early strengths of Walmart was its use of technology and analytics. And that's must be very much a part of your go-forward planning as well. Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, there's a lot of great investments when I think in our replenishment team and some of the investments that are made to really be smart around how we order and how we flow. Some of the things you'll even see in our stores where, you'll have an app on a phone now that helps with, customer monitoring. So we make sure we don't have more people than acceptable in the stores at any given time. A lot of our tech focus through this crisis is how do we digitize things to take some of that manual work off people so they can focus on the customer and the job at hand. And so technology will be a big part of it's been a big part of our past, and continuing to digitize to a new way of working is a big part of our future as well.
Absolutely. This isn't a question, but I want to read this to you because I think you'll be very happy about it. It's from Evangeline. Hey, John, I'm an avid Walmart customer and have grown to love the online system. I do my grocery shopping online, and actually I have everything I need from Walmart online. I have just one question. Are you able to make background check of your online suppliers?
Yeah, it's...
Oh, we've lost your voice, John.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, my Zoom, I got zoomed there for a minute. Apologies. So, if I had to paraphrase, so first of all, thank you for being a Walmart customer and shopper. Background checks for suppliers, I think was the question. So, specifically on marketplace, obviously, we run a large marketplace in Canada as part of our e-com business that invites many suppliers and sellers to sell. We do have protocols and processes to actually check our suppliers that we work on with Walmart International. And I think if there's issues that are surfaced or seen, we're looking to have those. We have a team that screens for that, but obviously if there's things that pop up, those are things to be flagged with us. And we do have strong agreements with our suppliers to make sure that they're selling things that are honoring things that are in keeping with our Walmart principles.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to sum and hand you and ask you for final comments. But what I heard you talking about is, if you can, in the middle of a panic, fix the panic, get rid of the red tape, get it fixed, but always think about what it's going to be like 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the road, so that you don't make the same mistakes. I hear you talk about the importance of utilizing and keeping your staff healthy and engaging them in the process. I hear you talk about the importance, and we've known this for Walmart for a long time, of the use of technology and use of analytics to help guide the process. And that there may be changes in stepping up suppliers, both locally, maybe, as well as, going back to some global areas. Anything I've missed out that you want to talk about that's just on your mind of what you really want to convey across?
Yeah, no. So first and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to speak with you, and want to just thank those of you on the chat that have been in our stores, and the team. I know in supply chain, but broadly Walmart Canada, very proud of what we're doing to try and support Canadians and the Canadian communities through this crisis. I think we've learned a lot. I think, as you said, Alan, the first one is never get lost in the day to day, because in a crisis, it's like trying to dig your way out of a hole. You're only going to go down. So it's important to be thinking not only about how I'm going to get through today for tomorrow, but what are the decisions I need to make today that can make it better. The second one, as you said, is don't be afraid of acting. Because as managers, there are a lot of decisions that you can reverse, and there are very few decisions that you make that are carved in stone permanently. And so I think, especially in a crisis, it opened our eyes to the power of experimentation, and not being as afraid of failure and not being perfect as I think we were pre-crisis. And then the final one is learned a lot about people and people, motivating people, being open, keeping communications going, and really listening for those ideas. Because when you're faced with uncertainty and you're faced with big challenges, a lot of times the people on the front lines in your organization see it long before you do in the home office. And so, it's in times like these where you need those grassroots ideas to be flowing back, because oftentimes those are the signals that are going to tell you where the big changes are going to occur. So those are the few things I'd leave you with, but really I've enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate the opportunity.
John, it's been a delight, and I think everybody now knows why you're such an important element within Walmart. Thank goodness you're in Canada. I appreciate you being here. John, thank you. Robert, back to you.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. Thank you so much. And please join us for our next fireside chat. That's on June 11th with the Toyota president. That will take place June 11th, 1 week from today, with Toyota president and CEO Larry Hutchison. Larry will be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on Toyota's manufacturing, dealerships, and customers. Again, my thanks for everyone who attended today's session, and a special thank you to John Bayliss from Walmart and my colleague Alan Middleton. Have a great day. Thank you.
Big thank you to everybody. Big thank you to John. Be well, everyone.